Human responsibility. No cameras. No cameras.
You should have said this at the beginning. Turn your back to the camera, and then.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, I think you've actually answered my question about what we would call the plagues, actually. So I kind of think that's.
Oh, is that
well, yeah, that's what I really was interested in.
Our point is to you now. You see here, you need to understand where we're coming from as Muslims in terms of our faith, in terms of our belief, what we believe in. Now the issue is, you see here, for example, since you are worried.
I'm just going to put this in the bag.
Yeah.
I'm listening to you.
I assume you are worried about your Bible, yes?
Well, I've taken the trouble to read the Quran, and I'm now kind of
I'm not talking about the Quran. I'm talking about the Bible.
And I've read the Bible as well, so I'm intrigued about the differences, I suppose.
Do you know when the Bible was compiled?
Well, it was obviously written, as far as we understand it, it was written by eyewitnesses in terms of the New Testament, and then the Eastern Church and the Western Church came up with the same 27 books of the New Testament at the end of the.
Actually, no, it wasn't written by eyewitnesses. Like, for example, the earliest manuscript, for example, they said they found. Paul, 1 second. Paul, can you come a minute?
It's a very good one.
Yeah.
I'll go grab it.
Yeah. Just ask him.
I haven't got much more time. But let me. One of the key. That was just happened to be something about the plagues I happened to be reading this morning. But another major question.
I will tell you something. Yeah. The first manuscript they said about the New Testament is 100 and something patches.
Is it the letter to Athanasius?
Yeah, I think so. It's 100 and something after Jesus.
I think it was later than that. I think it was in the 300s, wasn't it?
How are you, Paul? You okay? How are you, Paul?
Nice to see you again.
Yes,
Yeah.
I certainly do.
Well, I'm still
Come get close here, Paul.
Engaging. Well, I'm still.
Yeah?
Get on the right side of the debate here.
You'll be pleased to know I'm still reading the Quran. I'm still wrestling.
That's a great idea. Good.
Yeah. So we were discussing. We had
talking about the plagues.
We had about the
which
plagues, what happened to the time of Moses, peace be upon him.
And the fact there are 9 mentioned down there in the Quran, 10 in the Old Testament. So that was quite interesting. And the fact that there's no Islamic recognition of the Passover, is that? Am I correct in?
What do you mean by the Passover? You mean Jesus' Last Supper, or you mean
the original Passover?
Oh, the original one.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, it's not mentioned. No.
Yeah.
So what are the 10 signs mentioned in the Old Testament?
If I remember correctly, it's blood, frogs, gnats, flies, livestock.
Flies, so the extra.
Flies, livestock, oil, hail, darkness, and then the firstborn children. And the death of the firstborn children.
Okay, so but this is not a sign. This is something happens before Moses was sent. And that's why not killing the children. It was before Moses. This is not part of the sign.
It's the time of the Exodus. It affects the Exodus.
Yeah. The point that Moses was saved, and his brother Aaron, his brother Aaron was saved. And Moses said his mother has to put him in a cot and to throw him in the river. In the time because in order not to be killed. This before Moses. You understand?
That's the same time that Moses is still alive.
My point is, these are signs of the prophethood of Moses, peace be upon him. These are not just only for the children of Israel. Those came with Moses, peace be upon him. Do you see the difference?
Sorry, I missed that.
So when he came to Pharaoh to debate him, to challenge him, that's the signs came. The things which came before, those are not the signs. These are actions of the people. They start killing literally every boy. In 1 year they will kill the boy, and the following year they will save the boys. So that's why Aaron was saved.
So Pharaoh was killing the firstborn sons of the Israelites.
Yeah.
But then God said, because you have killed my firstborn son, I will kill your firstborn son unless you celebrate the Passover. So according to the Old Testament, the angel of death was the 10th and final plague. The angel of death went over the land of Egypt and struck down the firstborn son of all humans and all animals as well, unless they sheltered under the blood of the Passover lamb. So God said there will be a death in every house. It'll either be the firstborn son or it'll be the lamb. And therefore, they were instructed, which they still do to the day, the Jews still to the day, they took the blood of the lamb and they put it on the doorpost of the lintel.
But what is
and as the angel of death came over the land...
Passed over.
That's why it's called
That's
Passover.
the whole point. That's why it's called passed over.
That's what it's called
The angel passed over them
That's it,
to
yeah.
spare them.
That's why
it's called passed over, yeah.
That's why it's called the Passover.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
why it's still celebrated to this day. So the angel of
But we have
if the angel of death saw the blood of the lamb on the doors, he would pass over that house and not kill the firstborn son in that household, because the lamb acts as a substitute. The lamb takes the place of the firstborn.
So the angel will not recognize that this house have slaughter or not, except if they see a blood on the door.
The angel won't kill the firstborn son of that household if they see the blood of the lamb on the door. That's right. And that's what the Jews celebrate around Easter time every year to this day.
So the angel, they don't have the access except through to see the signs on the door.
They're not permitted to kill the firstborn unless they see the blood. That's it.
You see, that's a big issue, by the way. But going back to the point, because we're discussing about the Christianity, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's why we mention about the preservation of the Bible and the preservation of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
That's the thing here, which I need your assessment, please, Paul, about the
Well, that's a
preservation.
relief. I thought it was about all these plagues.
No.
I'm not an expert on plagues.
No.
Well, you knew
What I know
Passover.
about plagues?
Yeah, the Passover.
I'm afraid I have to get about 5-10 minutes.
We're talking about the preservation of the Old Testament.
Question for you, Paul, as I've got you, because I was reflecting on what our last conversation was about 6 months ago.
It was quite a while ago.
Okay, one of my big things which keeps on churning in my mind is the concept of grace, which I know you're very familiar with. But would you kind of sort of recognise that even if the Christian concept of grace is not true, even if it's not true, the concept of grace creates an idea, a concept of God that is more loving and more just than the Islamic idea, even if it's wrong? Would you recognise?
No, I see it the other way around. I think the Islamic understanding of mercy and grace is far more real and profound than the Christian. I'll give you an example. In Christianity, there is no real forgiveness of sins. It just doesn't exist. For the forgiveness of sins, for sins to be forgiven by a blood atonement, a human sacrifice, is not real forgiveness, but a payment of a debt, a sin debt, the language that Paul uses. In contrast, in Islam, where God is called Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, God is the most merciful, the most compassionate, and He forgives whom He wishes, a sinner who repents. And that's what Jesus teaches, actually, in the Lord's Prayer in Matthew chapter 6. He teaches it in the parable of the prodigal son in Luke 15, and the parable of the tax collector and the Pharisee in Luke 18, and so on and so on. For Jesus, you pray directly to God without intermediary, and God directly forgives sins, because He is forgiving and merciful. In Christianity, particularly in Western evangelical Christianity, God doesn't do that. He must have a sacrifice, a human sacrifice, and only by the blood of that human sacrifice can God forgive people. I would say that's not forgiveness, that's not mercy, and it's certainly not just. Why? Because the person, the human being that is killed, tortured to death, horribly, his blood is required by this bloodthirsty deity.
Of which the Passover is a picture of.
Is an innocent human being. Is an innocent human being. And we know from Ezekiel, for example, and other prophets, that sin cannot be transmitted to other people. We are responsible for our own actions. In Christianity, our sins allegedly are somehow transmitted or given to...
Of which we think the Passover lamb is a picture of.
Yes, but Jesus is not a lamb. Jesus is a human being.
But he's described as the Lamb of God.
Well, you may call him a lamb, but he had 2 legs, not 4. He didn't have a tail, and he didn't go ba ba. He was a man.
Yeah, but he wasn't a
He was a man.
Yeah, but he referred to himself as a
It's
gate.
quick like a duck.
And the Bible prohibits metaphorical killing of human beings for sacrifice. Is outlawed in God's law in the Torah. So to actually have a blood sacrifice of a human being, not only is it repugnant, it doesn't involve God being forgiving, it's also ruled out as haram in the law of God on every count. Islam, God doesn't require human sacrifice because He is merciful. And I say Jesus was a Muslim prophet. He was Islamic because what He taught in the early Gospels is exactly what we find in the Quran and exactly what we find in the Hadith. But we don't find it in Christianity. If you want to be a follower of Jesus today, you must embrace Islam.
Well, what do you make, if I may come back to you, what do you make of all those sacrifices going on, in Old Testament days, day after day, year after year, the fact there's the Day of Atonement, the fact there's the Passover, which the Jews... What's your understanding of all that?
Can I ask a quick clarificatory question? I'm not being funny here, but have you read the book of Leviticus?
I have.
Excellent. So now I can refer to it, and I'm not referring to something you haven't read.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I've got it here.
Excellent. We can look it up. So if you look at Leviticus chapter 6 and chapter 7, they are specifically dedicated to sin offerings.
Yeah.
There are other offerings in chapter 1. These are Thanksgiving offerings, other kinds of offerings.
Yeah.
But these ones are sin offerings.
Yeah.
And if you read the refrain that constantly goes through chapter 6 and chapter 7 and chapter 8, is that these sin offerings are for unintentional sin, for inadvertent sin. You can get the Bible, we can look at it now if you want. It doesn't say that they are for intentional. Well, what's an intentional? How do I inadvertently commit a sin in Judaism? Can you think of how I do that?
If you touched a dead body.
True.
Or if you were a woman and it was your time of, dare I say, that's...
it's not really a sin, it's an uncleanliness.
Yeah, or uncleanliness, but I think wasn't the sacrifice there
were lots of sacrifices for lots of things, but I'm talking about sin offerings.
Okay,
sin offerings.
If you're a leper? If you're cleansed from your leprosy?
No, it's not a sin. Being a leper is not a sinful condition.
But
you're unclean.
But I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that the Old Testament sacrifices were sin.
No,
because it's so.
Okay, there could be sacrifices for many, many different reasons. You have Thanksgiving sacrifices. I mean, if you get the Bible out now, you can look at chapter 1, and then chapter 2 has other kinds of sacrifice. Chapter 3. Only when you get to chapter 6, 7, you get sin offerings, sacrifices.
16.
So Yom Kippur is a sacrifice. So what I'm saying is the regular sacrifices for sin in the temple are not for intentional sin. Now the unintentional might be, for example, if I don't know, if I was a youth in Israelite and I missed the class where it said, you can't work on the Sabbath, and I missed that class, off I go and do a spot. Now, that is unintentional. I don't mean to deliberately sin, but I have sinned. I violated the commandment of God, the Ten Commandments. So I need to sacrifice in the temple. But that's an unintentional sin. If I deliberately defy the law about the Sabbath in the Ten Commandments, there is no sacrifice. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And we know this because if you talk to Orthodox rabbis today, which I've done, one of them happens to be a friend, Tovia Singer, actually, you might have heard of him, is a rabbi based in Jerusalem. Okay. He frequently lectures to Christians on this. He's a qualified rabbi. He will tell you this is not Jewish teaching, what you're saying. You don't need a sacrifice for all sins. And the final point is this. Imagine...
what's your understanding of the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, then? The Christian understanding is that sin separates human beings from human beings and human beings from God. Sin always separates. So atonement, at-one-ment, and therefore the sacrifice brings relationship back together by the death of the two.
No, but that's not what Jesus taught. That's not what Jesus taught. How we reconciled with God, according to the teaching of Jesus in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. How we reconciled how we made right with God. How we justified before God, according to the teaching of Jesus in the Synoptic Gospels.
Well, maybe I've got this wrong, but my understanding is that we are justified by his blood shed on the cross.
That's exactly what Paul says.
Yeah.
He says it in Romans chapter 3, you're right. But that's not what Jesus taught. Notice I asked you about Jesus, not Paul.
Obviously we would say that Paul was...
I think they're different religions. What Paul teaches about atonement is completely different from what Jesus taught in the Gospels. Let me give you an example.
Please.
Luke 18, and there are lots of examples like this. This is one example of many I could give. Two people go up to the temple in Jerusalem to pray. There's a tax collector, bad guy, collects taxes on behalf of the Romans. We all go boo, at this age. And then there's a Pharisee, the good guy, because he's pious, he prays, he fasts. He's a good guy, like a good Muslim, So this is the story. They both got to temple to pray. And the Pharisee, according to Jesus' teaching, praise to God, says, thank God I'm not like this tax collector. I pray, I fast.
I do
all these good actions.
He's religious.
He's a religious Jew.
Yeah.
Thank God I'm not like this guy.
That's it.
And the tax collector, the bad guy, boo, doesn't even look up to heaven. He beats his chest and says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And Jesus said that man went home justified before God because What's the reason Jesus gives?
Well, because he repented and he turned to God.
Nearly, yeah. But notice it's nothing to do with him dying on a cross for sins.
No. But
What was the actual reason? Just to finish this off, what was the actual reason Jesus gave? You're close, but
he
not quite there.
confesses his sin, doesn't he?
Yeah, but not quite.
Okay, what's your understanding?
What did Jesus say? Not my understanding. What did Jesus? I'm looking at what Jesus said in the
Does he
gospel.
say, today you will go home justified or something, or today you will go home?
No, he said, yes, the tax collector went home justified before God because, and then he gives the reason why. Now, this is the gospel, this is the Injil, in my view, of Jesus. And interesting, and there's nothing to do with you, but I've asked hundreds of Christians this question, and do you know how many have got it right? In only one, you may be the second, who ever got this question right. In other words, they've actually told me what Jesus said in Luke 18.
I can't quite remember.
They never remember, and this is the gospel of Jesus Christ, how we're made right with God. Okay, so Jesus says, whoever humbles himself before God will be exalted. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled. So the answer is humble submission before your Creator. Now,
exactly the word of the Prophet.
I'm not a fluent Arabic speaker, but tell me, Sheikh, what is the word Muslim mean in English? It's an Arabic word. Submission to God. Really?
Yes.
So Jesus is preaching a very pure form of Islam in that parable. That's why Jesus was a Muslim. And that's why you must follow Muhammad, the last prophet of God, who teaches exactly the same message as Jesus.
And Muhammad, peace be upon him, said the same word. Man tawada'a lillahi rafa'ah. Whoever humbles himself to Allah, Allah will raise him.
Exactly. You see, a lot of these parables, you could find it in the Hadith literature of Muhammad. When I was a Christian like you, and I read the Hadith, I thought, I've heard this before. I've heard it in the Gospels. That's how I made the connection between Muhammad and Jesus, peace be upon them both.
Sorry? Only because you're blocking the camera.
Yeah.
I want to block the camera.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no.
Fair comment.
But you would deny that Jesus died on the cross, would you not?
The point
No
is
cameras.
No, not from him.
My point is this: when it comes to how we're reconciled with God, how we're justified before God, how our sins are forgiven, the teaching of Jesus agrees with Islamic teaching. What Paul teaches, which is blood sacrifice for atonement, is a different religion. And I'm saying we shouldn't follow the religion of Paul, we should follow the religion of Jesus and all the prophets of God, which is the same religion.
The religion of this Paul.
Not me.
You would, I take it as a Muslim, you would deny that Jesus died at all. Is that
Yeah. The question is how we're made right before God, with God. And Jesus did the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our trespasses. It's a prayer to God, not to the Father in heaven, not to Jesus, not to Mary, not through an intermediary like Paul claims in one of his letters.
Well, it starts off Our Father, so you're already reconciled if you're referring to God as Our Father.
So how we forgive, how our sins forgiven. Forgive us. This is a paradigmatic prayer that Jesus apparently taught his disciples, and we are to pray directly to God, not to Jesus or the Holy Spirit or Mary and all that. To pray, forgive us our trespasses, forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And the only condition here in verse 12, and unless you forgive your brother his sins, God will not forgive you your sins. That's the only caveat. Now, the expectation there, I would submit, is that God will forgive your sins if you pray to him in that way. If that is true, then Paul's whole doctrine of blood sacrifice and atonement, forgiveness of sins, is completely irrelevant. Even if it was theoretically legitimate, which it's not, human sacrifice is an abomination, but it's unnecessary anyway, because forgiveness of sins is already possible in Jesus' teaching about the Lord's Prayer. And that's the second example. I'll give you dozens of examples in Jesus where people are welcomed into God's presence and his forgiveness of sins without any reference to any sacrifices. Remember, Jesus says, remember this, remember what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. It's actually quoting from the Old Testament.
Well, that's true.
I'm quoting from the Bible.
I know, but no, Christians have
You see, when you say I desire mercy, not sacrifice, didn't you think that make more sense than the sacrifice? You said you have to have a sacrifice. And the word of Jesus, I desire mercy. You see, you literally contradict the teachings of Jesus just now.
Yes,
basically, he says something opposite to this.
If I remember context of that correctly, that those who were felt that they were saved by the sacrifice, the religion of sacrifice, if you like, rather than the reality of his sacrifice, which is the way in which God can express mercy.
But he didn't say that.
Well, that's
You're just adding words to things that he didn't say.
I'm hopefully just trying to add the context, if I remember correctly.
I can give you, now if you like, I can give you more examples of the same teaching of Jesus, which are called to Islam, if you like, or we can focus on why you think that even though Jesus said sins were forgiven by praying directly to your Father, that wasn't true, but we really need a human sacrifice, as Paul taught. Can you either reconcile that, or I can give you some more teaching from Jesus, which makes the same point repeatedly? Because there are dozens of
I'd
examples.
love to discuss it more, but unfortunately I've got to go.
Okay, well this is, well there you go. Well maybe in 6 months' time,
I appreciate
in 6 months' time we will come back
I appreciate
and we'll
it.
continue the conversation.
Yeah, hopefully next time. Hopefully next time. But as well,
thank
it's good to reflect on these
Yeah,
things.
no, I do, and I'll go away and think, and I'll go away and read more of Quran. Thank you,
that would be
gentlemen.
good.
I'm sorry, I would love to talk more, but I
All
appreciate
right,
your time.
all right,
What's
no
your name?
What's
problem.
your name again?
What's your name, gentlemen?
Ed.
Ed. All right, nice to meet you, Ed. You see here, Paul, subhanAllah, first of all, may Allah guide him. That's something which is good. And actually, he is a genuine, because he is.
No, he's a great guy.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
I like down here, I genuinely respect.
And actually, he comes as well from academic perspective. He's not just only, debating for the sake of debate, rather than wanting to find the truth, which is
that
good.
he's a clergyman. I have a suspicion that he's a priest or.
Yeah, I think so.
He's got that kind of demeanour. I think he's probably ordained.
Yeah.
He would never say that down here because it would, but I think I can smell clergy. I can tell them when they are. And I think he is.
Now you see here the continuation of the conversation that we have. This to educate, for example, us and everyone who's watching. Now, few points. Now, as you mentioned, that the Jesus of Islam, the Isa of Islam, basically is exactly what he was teaching in terms of the forgiveness, and especially the point is the blood sacrifice is literally, he said, when the quotation that you brought, which is, I demand mercy, I don't demand sacrifice.
In Matthew it says, Jesus, learn what this means, and then quote, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. So he's reminding the listeners to ponder that verse of God in the Bible, in the Old Testament. Think about what this means. So he's reminding them that God is not interested in sacrifices, he's interested in the things that Islam and his teaching share in common, mercy and so on. And this is not what God wants.
And that's why even in the Old Testament, what you mentioned, because I mentioned before here, on we entered that the sacrifice in the Old Testament, this is not for the intentional sins, for the unintentional sins, people they could make mistakes. This is something that happens by the people, so they will do kind of a sacrifice. And as well, we Muslims, for example, we do udhiyah, for example, on the day of Adha, etc. And that's not necessarily for atonement or something like that. Rather than we do it in order to, for the sake of God. And as well, we distribute the meat for the poor and the needy ones, etc. But the point is that the intentional sins, the person has to repent.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, that's how it is. And actually, the God of love, according to them, as you mentioned here before, the God of love, if God loves us, doesn't need a full sacrifice, because if there's sacrifice, that means there is no forgiveness. That means as if there's no forgiveness. That means they're paid for.
Exactly.
Adding to this, because this is before you came, and I said to him, for example, and that's what sometimes they get triggered when I say to them, did Jesus commit suicide? They say, no, you can't say he's committed suicide. I said, if someone knows that he's going to come and he's going to be killed, a definite kill. It's not something which is, if they believe Jesus is all-knowing, for example, as a word before he became a man, and he knows this, so he'll come in the form of a man, and then in that case, don't you think this is kind of a suicidal thing?
Yeah, it is, but it's wrong on so many levels. Any one of those is enough to refute the argument. The idea of human sacrifice is repellent and outlawed by God's law. The idea that God it doesn't forgive, he requires a payment of a debt, is also repellent if you believe in the God of love, a God of mercy and forgiveness, and all the other reasons as well. And Jesus himself, according to the Gospels, prayed on the night before he was betrayed, that God would save him from this trial. And of course, as Muslims, we believe that God answered Jesus' prayer and rescued him. But Christians must believe that God turned away from Jesus and refused his plea to be rescued from danger and did not save him. And that itself is hugely problematic because allegedly Christians believe that God is a God of love and so on, but he wouldn't even hear Jesus' prayer. He refused his prayer of his own son.
Rejected
He rejected him. He was begging God, please take this cup from me. And they have to believe that God said, sorry, no, I want you to suffer, be tortured horribly to death because I love you so much.
Because I love you and I love everyone.
This is abuse. This is abuse. This is child abuse. It's child abuse. So on many, many levels, that whole thing collapses. And to be fair, I want to be fair here, many Protestant Christians, particularly theologians in recent years, have rejected this doctrine, and they've turned to the more Islamic doctrine of God being merciful and loving, and turned their backs on that doctrine. Seriously, there are many Protestant theologians have done that. So,
like who? Like if you know?
Well, I mean, most bishops, most theologians in the Church of England probably actually.
Seriously?
No, they have, because they recognise that it's a repellent doctrine. It doesn't fit in with the idea of God being loving, who would refuse Jesus' message, who requires a sin sacrifice, human sacrifice. This is not the gospel they believe in.
Well, that's interesting.
But evangelicals, though, who are still a small minority, though, of the church in general, they do believe that.
Now, the other question is, were there any monotheist Christian in the first 3 centuries?
Yes.
Who are they?
Well, they are called different names. I call them the Ebionites.
Ebionites.
Ebionites. Now, this is a Hebrew word meaning the poor, and they were Jewish Christians. And they did not believe Jesus was God. They believed Jesus was a prophet sent by God. They believed he was Ebionite. He was a Messiah. There was a disagreement amongst them. Some believed he was born of a virgin, some didn't. But they didn't believe that the human sacrifice was required. They were very Islamic, actually. And the beginning of that movement, I believe, started with James, the brother of Jesus. He was the head of the Jesus movement in Jerusalem. Because if you look at what he believed, what his religion was, it wasn't the same as what Paul believed at all. Very different.
And he wasn't following. You could say he wasn't. He was a Jew in terms of from his lineage, and at the same time he believed in Jesus to be a prophet of God. This James, the brothers of Jesus.
That's right. And he believed, for example, some of the differences between James and Paul. James believed that you were saved by your faith in God and your works, your deeds. Whereas Paul says you're only saved by your faith in Jesus.
In Jesus. And the blood sacrifice.
Is sacrificed on the cross, exactly.
Yes.
But that's not what James believed. He said you believe in God and in your works. And that's what Islam teaches.
Yes.
It's not just faith alone. It's faith and works. God requires both of you. Paul says it's not required. So James is with Muslims on this fundamental matter of faith.
I see. So the Ebionites, were they chased by Constantine later on?
No, they probably died out in the 4th and 5th centuries. That's when our records...
This is after Constantine, isn't it? Constantine was in the Council of Nicaea.
4th century.
So were they chased by Constantine?
There are very few references. No is the answer as far as I know. But these Jewish Christians followed the Jewish law. They were Torah observant Jews. They followed the halakha, the Jewish law. Paul said the law had been abolished. In his letter to the Ephesians, chapter 2, verse 15, he said, God has abolished the law with its commandments and regulations. James upheld the law. We know that because multiple sources tell us. Josephus, the Jewish historian, actually talks more about James than about Jesus, because he was very famous. And other sources as well mention James. He was a head of the church, the first leader, not Peter, and he was a Torah observant Jew. So there was a tension, a schism between James and Paul. We even see that in Paul's letters in Galatians, where he says men came from James to sort out Peter. So Paul doesn't like James, and yet he was. Of
course, he would not like James because
he had a different religion, really. I think.
Basically, now what about the Nazarites? The Nazarites, what they were? What their faith?
The Israelites.
No, Nazarites or
the Nazarites. Well, you see, the Jewish Christians, I think, were known by different names. So some were called the Nazarenes. Or the Nazarites. Now, why were they called that? There's a discussion about that. My view is because Jesus came from Nazareth, then they were the followers of the Nazarene, the man from Nazareth. That's my view of the. Now there are other theories.
But they were monotheists.
These were Jewish Christians.
They were Jewish Christians.
Yeah, there could have been different sects of Jewish Christians, or the Ebionites, as they were called in the 2nd century, were the biggest Jewish Christian movement.
Now, the last thing, were there some known figures in the Christian history who were monotheists in the first 3 centuries, like known figures? Some people they will look up to, they will say this person, apart from James, for example, the brother of Jesus.
Well, this is an interesting question. Some people say that in the early 2 or 3 centuries, even leading Christians were not really Trinitarian. They believed that God was the true God. Yes, he had a son and so on, but the son wasn't fully God. So you had this sense of almost monotheism there. But pure monotheism, I think you have to look to the Jewish Christians. And they became seen in the later Catholic Church as it emerged in the 2nd century. The Jewish Christians who were the original faith of the Jewish disciples.
They fled to...
They became seen as heretics. The original followers of Jesus became seen as heretics by the church and were criticized and put down, ultimately persecuted out of existence by the church, which had actually rejected the religion of Jesus and Jesus' disciples. It's very ironic. It's very ironic.
You mentioned to me about Galatians, I think, what's his name? He was in the 1st century, yes?
Well, Paul's letters to Galatians, written about AD 50 or so,
by the way, there is a known priest who didn't believe in the crucifixion of Jesus. What's his name?
A priest?
Or some known figure.
What I did recently, there's some letters written by Ignatius of Antioch.
Ignatius of Antioch.
I need to explain a bit though. He was a very famous bishop in the early church. He's a saint in most of the churches. And he went off. He lived most of his life in the 1st century. So his life possibly overlapped with some of the apostles actually. A bit later, but overlapped
in the 1st century.
In the 1st century. As a very, very old man in his 80s, apparently he was tried and sent to Rome to be executed, to be eaten by lions, basically.
Seriously.
As it happened in those days, the lions were a bit hungry, they wanted the Christians to eat, and the Romans were very kind and they supplied some dinner. And the thing is, he wrote 7 authentic letters, which are accepted today as authentic, and one of them refers to Christians. He's criticizing them, by the way. He's not agreeing with them.
So Ignatius of Antioch.
Ignatius of Antioch criticizes those Christians who deny that Jesus was crucified. So we know therefore they existed because he criticized them. That's what I was referring to.
So he didn't believe that Jesus was crucified, basically.
No, Ignatius of Antioch believed he was what we would call a Catholic today. He certainly believed Jesus was crucified, but he referred to in his letters people who didn't believe that Jesus was crucified, and that was my point. So there was clear difference of opinion amongst Christians. Some thought he was, some thought he wasn't crucified.
Okay.
That was my point.
So he believed there's a different view in his letter.
He referred to Christians who didn't believe Jesus.
What did he say to them?
Well, he criticized them. He said you shouldn't believe that. But the point is, he referred to their existence. It's an indirect reference to their existence.
Okay.
Therefore, we can deduce that certainly by the end of the 1st century or earlier, there were some Christians who didn't believe Jesus was crucified.
I thought, by the way, it's the other way around. I thought he believed that Jesus wasn't crucified. No. So, meaning
he wouldn't have been a bishop.
He knew some people who identified themselves as Christian.
Yes.
And they believe that Jesus wasn't crucified.
Correct.
And he was criticizing them, which means it's kind of recognition about them, about their existence, basically.
So they exist. There's acknowledgement they existed. So because some people say, no Christian believed that.
And he didn't say about them that heresies.
The Quran says this. No one would think that. Well, in the 1st century and the beginning of the 2nd century, there were Christians, and we know that because people refer to them in authentic letters we have.
I see. And he didn't say they're committing heresies or whatever. He didn't say about them. Did he refer to them that, or just only criticism?
Well, you see, Ignatius was a man who believed Jesus was God. He was a follower of Paul. He's not someone we would agree with.
I know.
The point is that he was aware of these other Christians and he condemned them for believing what they did. He condemned those who followed the Jewish practices. He condemned Jewish Christians as well in the same letter. So he's basically an Orthodox Catholic bishop who's criticizing the heretics. But for us, they're not heretics.
I see.
They're not heretics.
I see. That's interesting. Allah يجزيك الخير يا Paul. والله may Allah reward you. جزاك الله خير. It was an interesting discussion. Hopefully we'll have a more discussion with him maybe next time.
He's in a difficult position because he can't deny that what I've said about Jesus' teaching is in the Bible, because it is in the Bible, but it contradicts what he believes about Christianity. So his answer is, bye. No, it is. What else can he say? Because he can't disagree with Jesus. He can't disagree with Paul in his own mind, so he's got a dilemma. So he literally had nothing to say. He had to go.
By the way, the things that he has mentioned, that's something which is, I believe, that it has some issues. For example, what I call it, the Passover. Is it called the Passover?
Yeah, I didn't quite agree with what he said. It wasn't quite accurate.
I know.
But I wasn't going to quibble about everything. But
Okay. The point is, you see here, if God has commanded the angels to do something, for example, God commanded the angel to do something. Suppose go with them, means the angel, for example, if those people, some people who could fake it to put fake blood there or something like that. Meaning, the angels not only will recognize only the blood by the door in order to consider there is a sacrifice happen in this family or the sacrifice didn't happen in this family. It doesn't work like this, firstly. Secondly, if the children of Israel or if pharaohs, they have done all of these horrible things to the children of Israel, suppose this, I mean, we believe as well those young children who are newborn, for example, they're innocent, generally. So God, for example, again, you see here that because by the way, he is one of those who believes that that Jacob wrestled with God, because before he came, he said Jacob wrestled with God and Jacob defeated God, etc. That's why he gave him the land, etc. So all of these things, I said, look at this, look how you humiliate God. To the extent a man will wrestle God, and actually not just will wrestle him, and will defeat him in a wrestling.
As you know better than I, the Torah has been changed.
Yes.
It's not the original Torah. It has things which shouldn't be in there. It's been interfered with and corrupted.
I see.
And even Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, in the book of Jeremiah, in the Bible, our Bible today, chapter 8, verse 8, says that. It says the lying pens of the scribe have changed the Torah. So even the Bible, in one of his books, recognizes that it has actually happened.
He said what in Jeremiah and which one?
Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 8.
Okay.
It's a well-known verse where Jeremiah himself angrily denounces the scribes, the Jewish scribes, who have altered. Changed the Torah. So this is not just a Muslim idea. This has been recognized even by Jews themselves.
By Jews themselves.
Even in the Old Testament, which is a library of books. It's not just one volume. It's a library of books. So later books like Jeremiah have criticized the way the Torah has been altered. So this is something that supports the Muslim view, of course.
And by the way, there is, I know there is a gap in terms of narrations in the Old Testament. What is the gap? Is it 1,000 years or something?
Well, the oldest copy of the Old Testament we have is in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's dated around 200 BC, so just over 2,000 years ago. But the events it describes, our Bibles talk about, goes back to the time of Moses, back to the time of Abraham. This is about 1,000 or 2,000 years before that. So there is no isnad, there is no manuscript at all for many, many centuries. Many centuries, 1,000 years, however long you want to make it. Because we have 200 years BC to the time of Moses when he wrote down the Torah, allegedly. Well, it's 1,000 years, over 1,000 years. How do we know it's been accurately, reliably, faithfully transmitted? The answer is we don't.
We don't.
Except we know that has been changed. The Quran tells us this, and says to use the uncorrupted, pure revelation, which is the Quran, in deciding what is true and what is false in them. But also the Bible writers themselves admit this. Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 8. Look it up, Google it, and you'll see it says exactly that.
الله يجزاك الخير يا بول، ما الله رودي، جزاك الله خير. ما الله increase on all خير، جزاك الله خير أخي، الله يبارك. جزاكم الله خير all my brothers، جزاكم الله خير. It was interesting discussion. الله يبارك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
I just saw him down there. Wait, is that him right there?
What?